The Tau Empire consists of many conquered systems, whose inhabitants have been incorporated within Tau society and military forces. As such, these offer the perfect opportunity to create your own custom Xenos races, and I'll be doing just that in this video. So join me as I construct a member of the Thaltean race. But first, let's hear from the sponsors of this video, War Thunder. If you're watching my channel, then there is a good chance that you have an interest in military history or vehicle combat games, which means War Thunder will be right up your street. It's a free-to-play game that allows you to take control of over 2,500 tanks, planes, helicopters and ships from 10 major nations spanning from the 1920s up to the modern day. And it can be played on PC, PlayStation, Xbox and even on iOS and Android mobile devices, so now you can play wherever you go. As a bit of a history nerd, one thing I personally love about War Thunder is its incredible attention to detail. I have a whole bunch of books about tanks, but getting to see those vehicles fully modelled down to their engines, fuel tanks and crew with realistic graphics and authentic sound effects is amazing. Even the damage is realistic, and if you get hit, you'll see exactly how your vehicle is affected with an X-ray view that shows you where the shell penetrated and what caused the destruction. Plus, you can fully customize your vehicles with camouflages, historical markings, and even more. Now, regardless of what kind of player you are, there is a game mode for everyone. Arcade has fast-paced action, Simulator has that hardcore realism, and Realistic gives you a balanced experience. You don't need any extra hardware either. You can take control of a tank and even fly aircraft with just a mouse and keyboard or a controller. Even on lower-end machines, War Thunder runs great thanks to its optimized Daegor engine. So, if you want to join over 70 million players in epic battles on PC, PlayStation, Xbox or mobile devices, click my links in the pinned comment and descriptions below. And if you're a new player or someone who hasn't played in the last 6 months, you can grab yourself a bonus pack on PC and consoles, which includes premium vehicles, the exclusive Eagle of Valor Decorator, 100,000 Silver Lions and 7 days of premium account access. But hurry, it's a limited time offer. Thank you to War Thunder for sponsoring this video, and let's get back to our custom Xenos race. The Thaltean are an insectoid race who, while physically weak, possess incredibly analytical minds. While most find themselves aboard the Tau fleets or assisting in colony management, there are a few who make their way into the service of the Firecast, where they act as drone controllers. To craft this Thaltean, I began with a Dustback Hellamite from the Necromunda range. After removing the parts required to build one, I then cleaned up the parts. Normally, the Hellamites sit on a much larger base. As I intended to mount my Thaltean on a 40mm in order to use it as a firesight team, I needed to condense the rear legs somewhat. This was achieved by first performing a quick dry fit against the torso. This allowed me to get an idea of how much of the leg I needed to remove. After another quick comparison against the base, I trimmed and adjusted both the leg and the foot so that the foot faced forwards and that it sat beneath the torso. Once I was happy with how things were lining up, I glued the leg together and then to the torso. This process was then repeated on the second leg. However, instead of attaching the front to the base, I instead cut away the small plate that was attached to it. This allowed me to glue the leg together and have it held up above the base. Beneath this foot, I then superglued a lump of torn up cork floor tile. This gave the appearance that the Thaltean was climbing across a rocky outcrop. To help incorporate some Tau technology into the insectoid body, I dipped into my Tau bits box and grabbed the torso of a stealth suit. I intended to attach the front plate of the suit to the Hellamite torso, but it first needed to be removed. So, using my saw and knife, I carefully cut away both halves of the front panel from the rest of the torso before cleaning up their edges with my knife. With the front plate removed, my next task was to mount it onto the Hellamite's carapace. The rear pieces of chitin were glued to the thorax, but the front panel was kept separate for the time being. This made it much easier for me to begin flattening out the forward edge of the armour. I did this incrementally, making frequent comparisons to the stealth suit armor panel. I then continued these tweaks until I was happy with how things were lining up. But before I could glue anything, I first needed to clip away part of the armor panel. This allowed me to rotate the plate upside down and glue it to the chitin, with the armor sweeping around to fill in the spot where the Hellamite's head would normally sit. With the armor in place, the optics array could then be attached. From here, I then attached a couple of the stealth suit shoulder pads over the rear legs. This helped to further differentiate the Thaltean from its original Hellamite. As I mentioned earlier, the Thalteans are effectively biological computers, and I really wanted to sell this aspect by directly hardwiring a couple of sensor drones into it. The first step in this process was to add some mounting points. I created some simple flat cylinders by cutting and trimming down a couple of pulse carbines. Once these had been liberated from the carbines, I glued both of the cylinders to each side of the Thaltean at slightly different positions. To create the sensor drones themselves, I first cut away the sensor from a Markerlight drone. After cleaning it up, all I needed to do then was to attach a Fire Warrior shoulder pad to the top to create a simple sensor drone. As mentioned earlier, I wanted to hardwire the drone into the Thaltean. This would not only give me a way of creating the effect of a floating object, but also make sense in the lore I'd created for this race. Being able to process data extremely efficiently, a wired connection would shave off a few precious milliseconds and allow the Thaltean to analyze the battlefield more efficiently. I achieved this by bending a length of 1mm steel wire so that one section was straight and one end had a rough S shape. To attach the wire to the torso, I drilled a 1mm hole into one of the cylinders and another into the underside of the sensor drone. I then glued the S-bend part of the wire into the cylinder before mounting the drone into the other end with another dab of glue. By bending the wire in this way, I created the effect of cable hanging vertically below the drone and dipping slightly before it reached the torso. With the first drone in place, I then repeated the same process on the other side of the Thaltean, completing the miniature. However, I wasn't done just yet. I still needed to create the sniper drone itself. In the rules, these drones don't really have an effect and are just decorative, but it's still nice to be thorough. To create my own plastic sniper drone, I started out with the homing beacon from the stealth suit kit and clipped away both the sensor arm and forward-facing cylinder. After cleaning up these cuts, I then glued the homing beacon upside down to the underside of a regular Tau drone. Then, the sensor fin I'd removed earlier was glued to the top of the drone. For the weapon itself, I opted to use a Tau Pathfinder rail rifle. After cutting away the barrel from one of the rifles, I also clipped away a couple of normal drone fins and slightly flattened down their contact points. This allowed me to glue them and the rail rifle to the homing beacon, completing my sniper drone. All that was left to do now was to create a stand for my sniper drone. I built this by first tearing up some cork to create a small rocky outcrop. This, along with a few other chunks of cork, was superglued to a base. To mount the drone itself, I used some more 1mm wire and simply repeated my previous steps, drilling into the top of the rock, the underside of the drone, and then supergluing the two together. And with that, I was ready to start painting. Before I began painting, I hit everything with a coat of primer, specifically my very own Dead Animal Bits spray paint from the Colourforge. This is matched to Games Workshop's Rakkar Flesh and so has this really nice warm tan colour with just a hint of red mixed in, which makes it the perfect starting point for lighter colour schemes, especially when you intend to use contrast paints. Speaking of contrast paints, I wanted to give my Thaltean a pale purple hue, and so took some Magos Purple, mixed in a little airbrush thinner and applied this as a light layer across the Thaltean's entire body. The airbrush thinner did exactly that and allowed the contrast paint to flow away from the surfaces and directly into the recesses. Combined with the Dead Animal Bits primer, the Magos Purple gave me that pale purple hue I was looking to create. To create more of a natural complexion across the chitin, I decided to add a few spots of Shyish Purple. My goal during the step was to apply the spots in an irregular manner, making sure I didn't apply the spots in the same size or locations, but I did focus my application more towards the edges and ridges of the carapace sections. To help blend in those spots that I'd applied in the previous step, I applied a second coat of thinned Magos Purple. This time though, I was much more focused with my application. Instead of applying it across all areas, I instead painted it over the spots and the recessed areas of the chitin. The intensity of the Magos Purple was pushed even further in my next step. For this, I used a very small amount of Doomfire Magenta and painted this directly into the recesses. This contrast paint is incredibly intense, so you only need a little bit to make a strong impact on the colour. Once I'd achieved the base colours of the carapace, work could begin on the highlights, and for these I dipped into the Tooth and Coats range of paints. My first highlight was Ivory Tusk, and this was applied across both the edges and the raised bumps over the chitin. Finally, to finish things off, I applied a few small spots of Trooper White to only the sharpest points of the carapace. My next area of focus were the Tau parts of the model. I opted to tackle the original colour scheme of the Tower homeworld, and so began with a base coat of Manticore Ochre. For this step, I'd recommend mixing in a little water into your paint and applying a couple of thin layers, allowing each layer to dry fully in between. Once I'd achieved a good solid base coat, I targeted the recesses between the armour panels with some Archaic Sepia, before starting my highlights, the first of which was Cerberus Brown, that I then followed up with a mixture of Cerberus Brown and Ivory Tusk, which created an even lighter mix that was perfect for those corners of the armour panels. In addition to the pale orange of the Tau armour, there were also a few dark areas. These included the sensor array, the Tau symbols, cables, and a few other details. For all of these, I applied a base coat of Death Reaper. This was followed by a highlight of Dungeon Stone Grey. And finally, I finished things off with a few small spots of Wizard Grey. My next task was to paint all of the optics and lenses across the Thaltean and the drone. These were started with a base coat of Berserker Red. To create that reflective glass effect, I then took some Sanguine Scarlet and carefully painted over a little less than 3/4 of the lens, specifically the bottom left side. Then, I added an edge highlight of Demon Red over the areas that I'd applied the Sanguine Scarlet to previously. Finally, I finished off the effect with a small dot of White Star, placed into the top right of the lens. In addition to this, I also used this paint to apply a couple of line markings to a few points across the armour. Using some Dragon's Gold, I then base coated the segmented circles on the drone, as well as the Thalteans' bangles. Their recesses were washed with Battle Mod, and I finished them off with an edge highlight of Glistening Gold. With both models completed, my attention then turned to the basing, specifically the rocky outcrops found on each one. These rocks were given a base coat of Wizard Grey, which I thinned with a little water to help ease the application. I then covered all the rocks with another wash of Battle Mud. Before doing some dry brushing, I chose Carcharadon Grey for this step, and the dry brush allowed me to paint only the raised edges of the rocks, helping to create more of a realistic rocky texture. To fill in the remaining gaps around the rocks, I then turned to the texture paint Muddy Ground from AK Interactive. This was spooned onto the base quite liberally, but I did make sure to not overspill onto the legs of the Thaltean. Once applied, the paste was allowed to dry fully for several hours, after which it was given a dry brush of Ranger Cloak. From here, all I had to do was to clean up the bases and the flying rod with some Doom Death Black, seal in the paintwork with a coat of matte varnish, before adding a few spots of flock, which left me with this. And here we have the completed Thaltean and its accompanying sniper drone, completing my third custom Tau Auxiliary race. Now the Thalteans can stand alongside my Carathian Dominion and the Scrav Eok. Tau Auxiliaries are a great opportunity for kitbashing custom Xenos races. You can really explore some interesting concepts while still having a degree of familiarity in the Tau aesthetics and technology. If you're looking for something to build that isn't just a Space Marine, I'd highly recommend giving them a go. If you'd like to tackle this build for yourself, then you can find all the kits and paints I used to build it in the description below. And I also just want to quickly say that my Dead Animal Bits kit is now finally available for retail. So if you missed the Kickstarter, then you can pick up your own kits over on the Wargames Atlantic web store or through independent retailers such as Element Games. I'll include some links to it down below. And once again, thank you to War Thunder for sponsoring this video. Remember, you can play it for free on PC, PlayStation, Xbox, and even mobile. Just use those links below to get premium vehicles, the exclusive Eagle of Valor Decorator, 100,000 Silver Lions, and 7 days of premium account access if you're on PC or consoles, and are a new player, or haven't played in the last 6 months. But hurry, it's only available for a limited time, so don't miss out. Now, before I go, let me just say a huge thank you to everyone who continues to help keep this channel going. And if you'd like to support me too, you can get early access to ad-free videos, exclusive merchandise, and even your name in the credits. Simply follow my Patreon link below or hit the join button. Just like my top Patreon supporters did, who are Nail5, Axel Jonsson, Berserker, Dakota Kaburi, Daniel Dowling, Gabe Benavidez, Immaterial Creations, Maciej Savitsky, Matt Brower, Molly Mork, Mr. Grimm, Nima, Older Than Time, Pale Juice, Ryan Little, Snowman53, Swedsman, Tim, and War Novice. And my top channel members who are Alex Verne, Dave, Guy Bazant, John Gibbs, Kutch Cato, Mark Taylor, Nerdington Paint, Omnitom, Phoenix's Den, Philip Poya, SO, That One Tech Priest, The City of Cryus, Sire Acquired, Chupageo, and Whale Tussler. So until next time, thanks for watching, and goodbye.